Alright, so what I'm going to do while I have the bumper off to put the supports in that someone didn't put back in, I'm going to do a bumper tuck, which basically I want to get this edge pretty close to the light. I'm just going to take out about 3 inches. I'm going to keep this back end on it, so I'm going to cut it right about here. Go 3 inches forward, take that section out. So just got the bumper off. It was held on by a bolt there and there, which correspond to here and underneath. And they were pretty loose, almost hand tight, so that's disturbing. But first issue to figure out, so where am I going to get 3 inches out of these mounts? So figure that out. Alright, so took the mounting brackets off and just set them onto the frame, and when the holes line up, there's really no room for this bracket to go back without actually cutting the frame, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to actually move where the brackets mount onto the bumper. So out of the 3 inches I originally wanted, I'm only going to be able to get 1.5 inches. So this square here is what I'm going to actually cut out. I'm going to move the 2 tabs down to that line. And then for that mounting hole, I'm just going to take it right out of here. 1.5 inches. So it won't be 3 inches, but it'll still be a learning experience, which is number one what this is about, but also should tuck it in a little bit, make it look a little bit unique. Alright, now I got these ready to go. I need a prep to weld the tabs on. So I'm going to take any plastic bits out, go ahead and take these off, and then I'm going to take probably about 1 inch of chrome out. So I don't want to weld that, I don't want to smell it. I've already had sinus issues in my past, so not something I need to bring back up. I'll go ahead and strip these as well. also got it welded, shortened, so there are big holes and gaps. It is solid, has, I don't know, 1.25 inches welded on that side, and these little tacks. Plus before, I only had these brackets, one on each side holding the bumper on. The outer brackets weren't on, which I'm going to actually bolt on this time. And so overall the bumper should flap around less than it was before I started this project. Okay, got the tabs bolted on to the mounting bracket. You can see the tabs, I got them lined up. I'm going to go ahead and tack them. Got the welds done. A little shaky there. This one's a little better. I don't know if you can see it, the kind of the dark spots on the surface. It's just the impurities. I didn't get all of the chrome off, or the copper nickel plating, and it just kind of bubbles up like that. But I haven't welded in a while, and I need practice. Alright, so I'm in the side 2. I got them tacked on, just a fuse weld, no filler. Over here, I'm a dummy, so I did all my marks on the back side and try to cut out from there. What I should have done, because I cut it on this side, I should have marked it this side. So what actually happened, I went too far down on this one, so I had to add this filler, because that was a pretty big gap. So I got everything in there, and have the bumper on the ground now to be a little bit better support. So I've never done before is I have the trigger on my weld torch hooked up. I've never used one of these, so I'll try it out, see how that works. But I think probably gonna end up being better than trying to use the foot pedal over there. Try it out. Alright, my camera's about to die. I got the bumper bolted on. I'm going to have to take the brackets back off, because these stick out so the plastic won't fit over it. And also while I'm here, well, while I have them off, this gap I'm going to bring up. So basically lift it. There's different ways to do it. You can either cut these and weld them down. What other people do is just put washers under it. It's a side view. Definitely is tucked in. I like the way it turned out. Could go another, I don't know. Really just like another inch. And then it'd be really tucked how I originally wanted it, but pretty happy how it looks. I mean, it's not close to hitting a tire, and it's not too far off, but I'll probably still take the 1.5 inches out of there. And then this bracket, there's the original. This truck, I'm pretty sure it's been hit here, because this tab is bent, so I still have to. Took the bumper off and see the brackets. See my first one. Second one came out better. It actually flows. I'm not going to worry about. So what I can do to lift the bumper is put washers under here, under here. What I'll have to do is you got a clearance. Basically cut this part out to clear the frame horn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this one off. That's the top one, top mount. Bring it down an inch and weld it back on, because I don't want an inch of washers because that sounds like a pain. But I am going to have to do washers here because I don't really have any other choice. Well, I mean, I'd have to cut it here, find a piece of 1-inch metal and bring it down. But I might just keep it here. If I keep the nut where it is, then I won't need an inch of washer because that's already 3/4 inch. So I need maybe 2 washers there, so it won't be too hard to squeeze my hand in there and bolt the bumper back on. So I'll do that, move this one down an inch and eliminate the need for washers here because that's just going to make a pain putting the bumper back on. So I got the mounts welded on, got a coat of black paint on here, and actually came out all right. The only part I'm really happy with it on these brackets are these tabs. I don't really like how these came out. I don't like how, I don't know if you can see it. I don't have like a true sanding disc that I would use. Using the flap wheel just kind of starts gouging into the metal. It doesn't really, it removes more than the paint. It removes a lot of metal too. But at least they'll be hidden. Have it roughly bolted into place. Here's a bracket bolted on, at least on the top. So this one's just going to sit flat where it was before. This one, now, I'm going to throw some washers in there to fill that gap and run the bolt from the bottom before it used to come on top into this thread. Just going to go the other way. It's not an airplane, so I'm okay with running bolts that way. Alright, so I'm marking out where the 1.5 inch I'm going to take out is. I was just thinking in here, kind of in the middle, keep these mounting holes, but I want to use this rounded edge, or cut it as close to this, because this round and 90-degree bend is gonna stiffen everything when I weld it to help it. It's not gonna prevent it from warping, but it's gonna reduce it. Pro tip, disclaimer, I'm not a pro. Cut the outer side. If I cut this one first, then I'm gonna have this little piece that's gonna be hard to hold on to, and cut the second one. So cut this one so that way the next part is still on the bumper and I'm not trying to handle this little piece of metal and end up cutting my finger off. Alright, got it cut. One little screw up right there. That's gonna suck. Let me see if I can balance it. The whole cut kind of sucks. Need to trim down somewhere. Other side. Another mess up right there. Big old gap. Yeah. I don't know how to get rid of some of it. Is the tip right there. If I just trim that'll take a lot of it away. Well, time to get trimming. Alright, I think I'm gonna go with it. There's still a bit of a gap here, but I mean it's way less than a 1/16. Maybe like 3/64 or something, but either way, I can't fit my filler rod through there, so I'm okay welding it. This one, I'll have to trim everything to close this gap. And I'm worried about keeping it straight as I grind it, so I'm just gonna do this last. And it's on a curve, so I'm not too worried about it warping. But I'll weld everything and do this last. So, you know, when you weld, everything shrinks. So as I weld everything else, it's just gonna shrink and close that gap up. But, I mean, over here, it's really nice. To about here, from here to there, that section is where there's a bit of a gap, but I'm okay with it. All right, other side. Got the weld joints all cleaned up on both the bumper and the bumper piece. I have the magnet here to hold it in place, and well, I need to line it up better, but I get the idea. I'll just put it there, and it's holding it flush, so I'll just get a couple tacks where it's flush, and then the magnet's not doing the best job lining up, but once I get a tack on, I can move it to where I need, get it all flush, and then start welding it up. Okay, just finished welding it. After I got a tack every ½ inch, ½ inch or so, I went back and welded little bits at a time, kind of jumping around. The longest bit was, you know, maybe 2 inches. The gap that was here closed up nice. I have a couple pinholes that I want to fill before I start grinding. I'm gonna go in and fill these couple craters, and then I'm gonna weld the other side before I start my grinding. So I ground all the welds down with the flap disc, and you probably saw I went with the roto lock, whatever they're called, because it's less aggressive. Rather use like a die grinder, but all I have is a drill right now. But it's low speed, which kind of helps me out in reducing the amount of material I take off. The bumper cap's gonna cover this, so that's as much as I'm gonna do here. I don't see a point of trying to perfect it because it's going to be covered and I need to get it done. Here, I'm going to paint it, but I still want as good as I can get it in metal before. Hopefully I can just get away with filler primer and not actually use Bondo. But after I got the weld down more with the Rotolock, I went over it with a file. The file will help me see the high spots and low spots. I did have a low spot on the top side of the weld, which I hammered out. And it's actually, it was in, I think, this area where I don't know if you can see it. And the file marks are kind of even all the way across. Now here, there's a low spot right here. So I'm going to try to hammer that out because I won't be able to grind down to get that. And same thing right here. But you can feel with your finger. If going one way you don't feel it, but the other way you do, you know there's where the lip is or the high spot. Kind of here it's smooth, and then the dip going up I can feel underneath the weld that the low spot's right there. So I'll keep working it. Alright, so I don't know if I filmed this. I'll just edit this if I did. Here I put just Sharpie. If you don't have blue layout dye, or if you have some weird OSHA standards where you can't use the chemical of blue layout dye, Sharpie works well. Depending on, you know, you can get the big fat Sharpie, it makes quick work, and this didn't take long anyway. But I just made basically a layout so I could use my tiny file and it'll tell me the high and low spots. And see, pretty much just along the weld is where this side I have low spot, but then here I have the low spot. But I've just been working that. I watched a YouTube video on how to use these and I'm still probably doing it wrong. You see these are getting beat up. These are like the cheap ones off Amazon. They're not hardened, so these aren't going to last long, but they're doing a job, at least what I need them to. So I just continue. So that's it for this side. Filler primer and maybe a little Bondo is going to do the rest. So I got the lower valence sort of in place. I still need to trim that end. And right here, it's hitting on that part. I think if I cut this part of the frame off, see in there. Alright, so the outer bracket, I already did one. Got the process down, so I'll show you how I did it on this one. Use my table to mark where everything sits currently on the factory bracket. This will help me line it up when I re-weld it after cutting. So I'm going to make a mark at whatever this distance is. Then I'm going to move it in half an inch or inch and a half, since that's how much I cut off the bumper. I want to move this bracket the same amount. And then I'll make a mark here. So I need to take an inch and a half off because that's how much I took off the bumper. But I don't want to measure along the length of it an inch and a half because it's at the angle. So I'm actually, if I measured it this way, it's a little over an inch and a half. So I want to move the bracket an inch and a half this direction, because that's the way I cut the bumper. I trimmed it inch and a half in this direction. If I took an inch and a half off of this way and it'd still be too long. So right here I'm at about 1 3/4 is what I'm actually taking off of the bracket because of the angle. So that's something to look at when, well, if you're doing this or cutting anything that's at an angle of what direction you're actually trying to shorten it, and then how much to actually cut off of your bracket. So now I have my cut lines marked, so I'll be able to make a straight cut perpendicular to the tube center line, and then that'll be easy, and then you can look at it and see if you need to trim it to put it back together so you get a straight tube once it's cut and re-welded. So I made my cut, took that much out. Okay, so I got it welded together. You see, I have my 1.5 inches that I want. But now if we look, it's in 1.125 inch to 1.125. So I'm gonna have to add, cut right here, and extend this back out to make up for that difference. And I use the piece that I cut out from here and trim it to whatever, 1 inch or whatever, and then splice it in right here. Alright, so I got it welded together. See, it might have been a little too long, but it has slotted holes, so I'm pretty sure it's going to work alright. So I'm going to let it cool and then throw some black paint on it, and then I'll bolt it up. And here's the final bumper. Well, final metal work. The bumper cap still needs the end piece put on, but it looks complete.